Why was the armory so quiet that morning? Boots usually thundered across the concrete floor, metal clanged as rifles slammed into racks, voices bounced off the steel walls with jokes half-shouted over the noise. It was the kind of chaos soldiers found comforting. The noise meant routine, meant order, meant nothing out of place. But that morning, there was only silence. A silence so sharp it made the fluorescent lights buzz louder than usual. Colonel Harrington pushed through the heavy door, a folder of reports under his arm, his mind already drowning in numbers and logistics. He wasn't looking for anything unusual. Not today. Just another inspection, another round of sign-offs before the day blurred into the next. But he froze. At the workbench sat a soldier he could not place. No name came to mind. No memory of seeing her in briefings, in formations, or at the endless chow lines. She blended in the way shadows blend into walls. Short brown hair tucked under a plain cap. Fatigues rolled at the sleeves. No insignia that bragged, no medals pinned to catch the light. Just stillness. Her hands moved with a deliberate calm, metal glinting in her grip. A rifle lay across the table, not the standard-issue clatter of carbines. No, this was a sniper's weapon, the long steel barrel of an M24. She cleaned it with the kind of care men reserve for family heirlooms, not for government equipment. Each motion was fluid. Each click of the bolt sliding home echoed in the empty armory like a secret being spoken aloud. Harrington stopped mid-stride. Something about her presence unsettled him. It wasn't arrogance. He'd seen that before, soldiers puffed up with medals or bravado, desperate to be noticed. No, this was the opposite. It was silence. A heavy silence, the kind that settles around killers who don't need to prove anything anymore. He cleared his throat. The sound felt awkward in the room. "Soldier, that rifle, where did you get it?" Only then did she lift her eyes, gray, sharp, as cold as a winter sky that promised no mercy. Her voice was steady, almost bored. "Issued, sir." But Harrington wasn't fooled. The way she held it was issued. Issued meant trained grip, measured stance. Issued meant a soldier obeying manuals. This was different. Her hands wrapped around the stock like it was part of her body. Like the rifle wasn't a tool, it was an extension of her. Rumors had been circulating. Whispers passed between soldiers in mess halls and out on patrols. A phantom sniper. Missions turning in impossible ways. Convoys halted before checkpoints. Enemy commanders taken out from ranges no one dared attempt. Ambushes unraveling before they even began. No name ever appeared on the reports. Just one chilling line in after-action notes. Target eliminated. No friendly units compromised. The colonel took a cautious step forward, lowering his voice. "You've been out there, haven't you? Those reports, they were you." She didn't answer. Not directly. Instead, she slid the bolt forward, the metallic click ringing louder than any confession. She placed the rifle across her lap like a secret she wasn't ready to share. When she finally spoke, her words were calm, almost detached. "My name's not on the reports, and I'd like it to stay that way." Harrington felt his chest tighten. He had commanded elite soldiers for decades, Rangers, SEALs, Delta operators, men and women forged in crucibles. But there was something about this woman that didn't fit any chain of command, something untamed, something feral. "Who are you?" he asked softly. Her lips curved into the faintest smile, but her eyes never warmed. "Just someone who does miss." For a moment, the colonel didn't know if he should admire her restraint or fear the weight behind her words. Because what kind of life carved that level of certainty into a person? He didn't have an answer then. And yet, that wasn't the last time he saw her. 2 weeks later, Harrington found himself in the dust-choked chaos of a canyon ambush. An enemy force had pinned down one of their patrol units, jamming radios and shredding the air with machine gun fire. Reinforcements were still miles away. The colonel had flown in himself to coordinate an extraction, though truth be told, he hadn't expected to make it back out. Then through the smoke he saw her. Up on the ridgeline flat against the dirt, M24 resting steady on its bipod. No insignia, no fanfare, just that same silence. Bullets cracked below, ricocheting off rock, men screaming into jammed radios. Soldiers pinned down, casualties mounting. The firefight was chaos, pure and merciless. But on the ridge she was still, unmoved, like the storm around her had nothing to do with her world. Harrington crawled beside her, heart pounding, gravel grinding under his elbows. "Do you have a shot?" he barked over the roar of gunfire. Her voice was steady, almost gentle. "I have all of them." Before he could process the meaning, she fired. One shot, an RPG gunner collapsed mid-stride. Another, a machine gun nest silenced, its crew falling in a heap. A third, a fourth, every trigger squeeze timed with surgical precision, cutting through the chaos like a scalpel. Minutes later, silence returned to the canyon. Not the suffocating silence of death, but the stunned, shaking silence of men who had been spared it. The patrol staggered to their feet, battered but alive. The colonel turned to her, staring in disbelief. He'd seen skilled marksmen before, prodigies even, but never this. Never with such cold precision. Not a wasted round, not a shred of hesitation. It wasn't training, it wasn't luck. It was something else, something born in places no soldier should have to survive. "Who trained you?" he whispered. This time she didn't smile. She only pulled the rifle close, as if shielding it, and murmured words that would haunt him long after. "War did that night." Harrington wrote the report. He left her name out just as she wanted, because he realized something in that canyon, something he wouldn't dare put on paper. Some legends aren't meant for medals. Some don't belong in headlines. They live in shadows, carried only by whispers of those who survived a bullet they never saw coming. And as for the colonel, he never asked again where she got that rifle. Deep down, he already knew the truth. She didn't get the rifle got her. And from that moment on, Harrington understood a truth about war that no manual, no briefing, no doctrine had ever captured. Not every hero stands in the spotlight. Some bleed in silence, their victories measured not in medals, but in the lives they save without ever asking for recognition. Why didn't anyone know her name? On a base where everyone's business spread faster than wildfire, how could a soldier like her slip through unnoticed? Harrington couldn't shake the question. Days after the canyon ambush, he still replayed the image of her on that ridgeline, calm, steady, untouchable. Men owed their lives to her, but when he brought it up in passing, he was met with blank stares. Some soldiers claimed they had seen her once, maybe twice. Others swore she was just a rumor, a story whispered to give them hope before missions. The strangest part was, she didn't correct them. Harrington caught sight of her again, this time outside the barracks, seated alone beneath the shadow of a battered water tower. She wasn't polishing the rifle this time. She wasn't even armed. Just sitting, elbows on her knees, staring at nothing in particular. For a moment, stripped of the weapon, she almost looked ordinary. Almost. He walked over, footsteps crunching in the gravel. She didn't look up. He hated how awkward it felt, standing there like a boy interrupting someone else's solitude. Finally, he asked, "Why stay invisible? Soldiers deserve to know who saved them." Her reply came slowly, as though each word carried weight she didn't want to unpack. "They don't need a name. They need a chance to get home alive. That's enough." The colonel studied her, searching for something: pride, resentment, regret. But her face was unreadable. "Is it," he pressed, "enough for you?" For the first time, he thought he saw a flicker of something in her expression. Not anger, not defiance. Something quieter. A shadow of loneliness that passed across her eyes like a cloud skimming over the sun. But she said nothing. She stood, brushed the dust from her fatigues, and walked away without looking back. It wasn't the last time Harrington tried to reach her, but every attempt felt like pressing against glass. He could see something behind her silence, some wound, some story untold, but she never let it surface. And then came the mission, that would carve her deeper into legend. A supply convoy was scheduled to move through a stretch of valley that intelligence insisted was safe. Harrington didn't trust it. The terrain was too tight, the choke points too obvious. He pushed back, argued for delay. Higher command ignored him. Schedules were schedules, trucks would roll. So Harrington did the only thing he could. He asked her to shadow the operation. He didn't issue an order. He couldn't. Officially, she wasn't even assigned to his unit. He just asked. She gave a small nod, nothing more, and when the convoy pulled out at dawn, she was already gone. Hours later, the ambush came. Explosives ripped the ground apart, gunfire rained from the ridges. Vehicles burned, men scattered for cover. The valley became a coffin of smoke and steel. But in the chaos, something unseen stirred. Enemy gunners dropped one by one, cut down before they could fire their second bursts. A mortar crew crumpled before they could adjust their aim. Each crack of her rifle was swallowed by the roar of battle, unnoticed by all but the men who survived because of it. From his command vehicle, Harrington glimpsed her silhouette high above, crawling across jagged rock, shifting position faster than any sniper had the right to. She wasn't static. She didn't wait. She moved with the rhythm of the fight, as if the battle itself whispered where she was needed next. By the time reinforcements arrived, the valley had gone quiet again. The convoy limped forward, battered but intact. Soldiers slapped each other on the back, laughing in disbelief that they made it. But when they tried to credit one another, no one could agree on how. No one mentioned her. They didn't even know she'd been there. Only Harrington knew. He filed another report, and once again he left her name out. That night he found her alone by the motor pool, perched on the hood of a rusted Humvee. The rifle lay across her knees. Moonlight traced the edges of her face. For a long moment he just watched her in silence, trying to understand the contradiction before him. She saved lives with precision most could never imagine, yet refused even the smallest recognition. He finally asked the question that had gnawed at him since the first day in the armory. What did war take from you? Her head turned slightly, but her eyes stayed fixed on the shadows beyond the fence. Her voice was low, almost a whisper. Everything it could, and when there was nothing left to take, it gave me this. She tapped the rifle lightly with her fingertips. A curse or a gift, depends who's asking. Her words carried no bitterness, no pride, just a hollow acceptance like someone describing the weather. Harrington wanted to ask more, to pry into the wound behind her calm, but something in her tone stopped him, a line he wasn't meant to cross. So he stood there in the quiet, the hum of distant generators filling the air, and he realized something that unsettled him more than the silence had that first morning. She wasn't invisible because she chose to be. She was invisible because the world had stopped looking for her. And yet, in that invisibility, she had found power. Days passed, missions blurred together. Harrington carried on with his duties, reports and briefings, logistics and orders. But always at the edge of his vision, she lingered, a ghost in fatigues, not in the spotlight, never in the front of formations, but always there when it mattered most. The men began to notice something strange. Ambushes that should have shredded them were cut short. Convoys that should have been slaughtered made it through, and yet no one could pinpoint why. The soldiers invented explanations. Luck, poor aim from the enemy, divine providence. They laughed, joked, and shook their heads, but deep down a different kind of rumor began to grow. A whisper. The whisperer. No one claimed to know who it was, but the name spread. A shadow with perfect aim, a ghost that never missed, a protector unseen. Harrington never confirmed it. He never denied it either, because some legends weren't built on names or faces. Some lived only in the silence left behind after a bullet had already changed the outcome of a day. And still, one question haunted him. What would happen when the world finally noticed her? Why did she hesitate that night? For all her precision, all her certainty, something faltered. Harrington saw it not in the reports, not in the aftermath, but in the quiet before everything went wrong. The mission had looked straightforward. A forward observation post lost contact, believed overrun. A small team would recon, confirm, and, if necessary, extract survivors. Harrington didn't like it. The terrain was jagged, communications unreliable, too many blind spots, but command pushed it forward. Another schedule to keep. Another risk calculated on paper, not in blood. He noticed her at the briefing, seated in the back, head lowered, cap pulled low. She wasn't on the roster, yet no one questioned her presence. By then, her ghostly reputation had grown. Soldiers avoided asking, as if speaking her name aloud might break the spell. When the team departed, she slipped into the convoy without a word. No one stopped her. Maybe no one dared. The first half of the mission unfolded quietly. Too quietly. The outpost loomed ahead, its radio antenna bent, its sandbags shredded. The silence of abandonment pressed down like a weight. Harrington, monitoring from the command vehicle, felt the unease in his bones. Something was wrong. The lead squad advanced. No movement, no heat signatures, just ruins. But then the crack of a rifle, not hers, not friendly, a man dropped. Another followed. The air erupted. Enemy fighters poured from hidden tunnels, shadows turning into fire. The ambush was brutal. Soldiers scattered, scrambling for cover. Radios screamed with static. Harrington tried to restore order, but chaos devoured his commands. And for the first time since he had met her, she froze. He saw it, a half-second of stillness, her finger hovering just above the trigger. Eyes locked not on the enemy but on something else, something far away. A memory, maybe. A ghost clawing its way back into her mind. By the time she fired, it was almost too late. She dropped targets with her usual perfection, but hesitation had cost them. A young corporal lay bleeding out in the dirt. A sergeant screamed for a medic who couldn't reach him. The team was splintered, retreating into pockets instead of holding the line. Harrington's voice cracked through comms. "Pull them back, we can't hold this." Her shots slowed their retreat, carving paths through the kill zone. But her eyes weren't steady anymore. They flickered with something Harrington hadn't seen before. Not calm, not control, but pain. When the survivors finally staggered back into the convoy, battered and bloodied, the outpost lost, she vanished. Harrington searched the dust, the wreckage, the faces of the wounded, but she wasn't there. He found her later, crouched alone by the medical tent. The corporal hadn't made it. She sat in silence, elbows on her knees, her rifle leaning against the canvas wall like a condemned man awaiting judgment. Harrington approached slowly. She didn't look at him. Her voice came flat, stripped of the defiance he had grown used to. "I should have fired sooner." "You saved half that team," he said. "I lost the other half." The weight in her tone was heavier than any reprimand. He opened his mouth to argue but stopped, because he knew the truth. Soldiers are taught that hesitation kills. And for someone like her, someone who never missed, a pause wasn't just hesitation. It was betrayal to herself, to the rifle, to the unspoken pact she had made with the shadows. He wanted to ask her what memory had seized her finger, what ghost had forced her to stop. But when he saw her grip the stock of the rifle, knuckles white, he knew it wasn't a question she would ever answer. In the days that followed, whispers about the whisper shifted. Soldiers still spoke her name with awe, but the tone had changed. Some claimed she was human after all, that she could make mistakes, that maybe the legend wasn't untouchable. But there was another kind of whisper too, quieter, darker, a rumor that she had seen something out there on that ridge, not just the enemy but the past clawing back into her, a war inside her war. Harrington noticed the difference in her gait, the way she carried herself. Still silent, still invisible but heavier, like each step carried the weight of ghosts she couldn't shake. And then one night, long after the camp had gone quiet, he found her at the edge of the perimeter. Alone again, rifle across her lap, staring into the darkness beyond the wire. He joined her, lowering himself onto the sandbag wall. The night air smelled of dust and diesel. "You hesitated," he said. He didn't mean it as accusation, just truth. She didn't argue, didn't flinch. After a long silence, she whispered, "I saw his face." Harrington frowned. "Whose?" Her eyes stayed fixed on the horizon. "Doesn't matter, just someone I should have saved once, someone I didn't." The words cut him deeper than he expected, not because of what they revealed, but because of how quietly she said them, as if speaking them aloud was enough to reopen the wound. He wanted to offer comfort, to remind her that every soldier carries ghosts, but he realized comfort was useless here. Some losses don't heal with words. Some only sit inside you, festering, waiting for moments like that ambush to claw their way back. So instead, he sat in silence with her, two shadows at the edge of the night, each carrying their own invisible burdens. And in that silence, he began to understand something. Her gift, her curse, wasn't just that she never missed. It was that she remembered every face she had ever aimed at, every enemy, every friend, every ghost. That was the cost of her precision. And though the men still whispered her name like she was a myth, Harrington knew the truth. She wasn't a myth. She was a wound that never closed. The next mission would demand more of her. And Harrington feared, for the first time, that one day her ghosts would pull the trigger before she did. Why did she refuse the mission brief? When the orders came down, every squad gathered in the briefing tent, the air thick with sweat, dust, and the familiar buzz of fluorescent lights. A high-value target, a meeting deep inside hostile territory. Risk was steep, but payoff was higher. Harrington laid out the map, the routes, the contingencies. Men leaned in, studying every detail. But in the back corner, she didn't move, didn't even raise her head. Harrington noticed, he always did. "Questions?" he asked, scanning the room. No one spoke, not until a chair scraped softly against the floor. She stood, eyes hidden beneath the brim of her cap. Not this one. The room turned, stunned. Soldiers didn't refuse, not here, not her. Whispers started immediately, men shifting in their seats. Harrington dismissed the others, voice firm but calm, and when the tent cleared, only she remained, standing silent as a shadow. "Why not?" he asked. Her jaw tightened. "Because I know who we're hunting." It was the first time she'd ever hinted at knowing more than the map, more than the rifle. Harrington's chest tightened. "Explain." Her gray eyes lifted, meeting his, cold, steady, but burning at the edges. "He was mine once, and I didn't finish it." Harrington didn't push further. Something in her voice told him the explanation was buried in scars he wasn't meant to see. But he also knew command wouldn't wait. The mission would go forward with or without her. And deep down, he knew she wouldn't stay away. When the teams rolled out under cover of darkness, she wasn't on the roster. Yet, hours later, perched high on a ruined building overlooking the target site, there she was. M24 steady, eyes fixed. The compound below pulsed with enemy movement. Shadows slipping through doorways, rifles glinting in moonlight. Inside, the man she had spoken of. The man she hadn't finished. Harrington joined her on the roof, lowering himself carefully. "You said not this one." Her cheek pressed to the scope. "I lied." Her tone was flat, but her hands trembled slightly on the stock. He'd never seen them tremble before. The assault began. Squads breached from two sides, gunfire erupting into the night. Shouts echoed through broken walls, and from her perch she began her work. Each shot precise, each enemy cut down before they could flank or reload. But Harrington watched her closely. Something was wrong. She wasn't breathing steady. She was holding her breath too long between shots, as though fighting herself more than the targets. And then, through the scope, she saw him. The man, the one she hadn't finished. Her finger froze on the trigger. In that split second, her silence shattered. She whispered words Harrington barely caught. It should have been that night. It should have ended then. Below, the man shouted orders, rallying his fighters. Harrington hissed, "Take the shot." But she didn't. Not at first. Her mind pulled her backward to a memory she had buried under layers of discipline and steel. A night lit by fire, a village torn apart, faces screaming, and his, the man below, once close enough to touch, now a ghost commanding shadows. Her rifle shook, not from fear of him but from the storm inside her. A part of her wanted to drop the weapon to let him live, to avoid the finality of the shot. Another part burned to erase him, to finish what had been left undone. The hesitation stretched seconds into eternity, and then she fired. The man crumpled, cut down mid-command. The compound broke, fighters scattering in panic. Squads surged forward, clearing rooms, securing the objective. Victory rang hollow in the silence that followed. She lowered the rifle slowly, her breathing ragged. Harrington placed a hand on her shoulder, steadying her. She didn't look at him. Her eyes were fixed on the spot where the man had fallen. Back at base, the soldiers celebrated. A major threat eliminated. A mission deemed flawless on paper. But Harrington knew better. He found her outside again, seated alone, staring at her hands as though they belonged to someone else. "You got him," he said gently. Her reply was a whisper, almost drowned by the hum of distant generators. "Too late." Too late for what? For the ones already gone. Harrington felt the words settle deep in his chest. He wanted to tell her she had done what she could, that every soldier carries ghosts they can't save. But he knew she wouldn't accept it. For her, ghosts weren't abstract. They had names, faces. They lived in every hesitation, every scope she peered through. The men still whispered her name, the whisperer, with awe. But Harrington heard the shift. Rumor spread about how she had frozen, about the seconds where the shot hadn't come. Some said she was slipping. Some said her legend had cracks. But others said it proved she was human, that even shadows bleed. And Harrington began to wonder if that was the real danger. Not that she would be forgotten, but that she would finally be seen. Because what happens to a legend when the world learns it was a wound all along? Why did she keep watching the new recruit? The boy couldn't have been older than 19. Fresh out of training, boots too clean, eyes too bright. He trailed behind his squad, desperate to keep up, but Harrington noticed how her gaze lingered on him. She never stared at anyone. She avoided faces, avoided attachments, but something about him stopped her. They were prepping for another run, an escort through contested ground. A routine mission on paper, though Harrington knew better than to trust the word routine. She sat off to the side, rifle across her lap, silent as always. But her eyes flicked to the recruit again and again, narrowing slightly each time. When Harrington finally caught her alone, he asked, "Why him?" Her reply was quiet, clipped. "He looks like the one I couldn't save." There it was, no hesitation, no pretense, just the truth slipping out in the space between them. Harrington didn't push further. He didn't need to. The weight in her voice said enough. The convoy rolled out at dawn. Sunlight bled across the horizon, painting the desert gold. Soldiers joked in the back of the trucks, trying to mask nerves. The recruit laughed along, though his laughter was too loud, too forced. She sat near the rear, silent, scanning the ridgelines with eyes that missed nothing. The attack came mid-route. It always did. Explosions tore the air, the first vehicle flipping onto its side. Bullets ripped from the ridges, rattling against metal. The convoy screeched to a halt, men spilling into the dirt for cover. Harrington barked orders into the comms, his voice drowned by chaos. She moved, smooth, low, purposeful, rifle braced, scope rising. Her shots rang out, each one precise, each one opening breathing space where there had been none. But then the recruit. He broke cover too early, sprinting toward a burning truck where his sergeant lay trapped. Harrington shouted for him to stop, but the boy either didn't hear or didn't care. Her scope found him instantly. She tracked his run, breath caught in her throat. And in that moment she wasn't in the desert anymore. She was back in that other night, the one she never spoke of. Another boy, same age, same reckless courage, running into fire, running into death. Her finger froze on the trigger. She could have ended it. A warning shot, a suppression round to keep the enemy's heads down, anything to slow time, to buy him a chance, but her ghosts pinned her still. The recruit reached the truck, pulled his sergeant free. For a moment, Harrington thought maybe it would be enough. Then the shot rang, not hers. The boy collapsed in the dirt, the sergeant screaming his name. Harrington's gut turned cold. He turned to her, but she wasn't looking through the scope anymore. She had lowered the rifle, her hands trembling, not from fear of the enemy but from herself, from the choice she hadn't made. The firefight dragged on, her precision carving a path for the convoy to escape, but the boy bled out before the medic could reach him. Another ghost, another face to add to her silence. That night Harrington found her at the far edge of camp, where the lights didn't reach. She sat with her back against a rusted barrel, rifle lying untouched beside her. Her eyes were hollow. "You froze again," he said, voice low. Her answer came sharp, bitter. "I saw him. I saw the same damned face, and I let it happen again." "You saved the rest of them." "I don't care about the rest." Her voice cracked, shattering the silence that had always wrapped around her. She caught herself, lowered her tone, but the damage was done. He'd never heard her break before, not like this. Harrington stepped closer. "If you carry every ghost, you'll never fire again. You'll choke on them." Her jaw clenched. "Maybe I should." He stared at her, realizing for the first time just how close she was to unraveling. She wasn't just haunted by the past. She was chained to it. Every face she couldn't save, every hesitation, every shot fired too late. It wasn't legend that defined her. It was loss. The men still whispered about the Whisperer, trading stories of how she appeared out of nowhere, how she never missed. But Harrington heard a different whisper now, the one inside her. The whisper of doubt, of ghosts clawing at her trigger finger. And he began to fear something he had never feared before. Not that she would fail, not that she would die, but that one day, when the moment came, she would choose not to fight at all. The colonel lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling of his quarters. He thought about the boy, about the way she had said, "He looks like the one I couldn't save," and he realized something chilling. Her silence wasn't just armor, it was punishment, a vow carved deep to carry every loss until the weight finally broke her. But Harrington also knew this. Soldiers don't get to choose when they're finished. Wars have a way of dragging the broken back into fire. And the fire was coming again. Why did the radio go dead at the worst possible moment? The patrol was supposed to be simple: sweep, clear, return. They had done it 100 times, but halfway through the valley static hissed in their comms. Then silence. The kind of silence that never means peace. Harrington felt it first, that tightening in the gut every seasoned soldier knows. The valley walls rose too high, too close. A perfect kill box. He ordered the men to spread out, to move cautiously. But before the words fully left his mouth, the first RPG slammed into the dirt. The explosion ripped through the convoy. Dust choked the air. Enemy fire rained from above. Chaos swallowed them whole. And she was there, crawling to high ground, rifle slung across her back, eyes scanning through the haze. She reached a ridge, planted her elbows, and dropped behind the scope. Harrington watched her. The calm should have been there, the certainty, the silence he had come to rely on, but it was. She hesitated. Targets moved in her scope, men firing down on her unit, pinning them in. She could have cut them down. She should have. But her breathing stuttered, her finger hovered. She blinked hard, like someone trying to erase a memory that refused to leave. And in those seconds, precious, burning seconds, the enemy fire chewed closer. "Take the shot," Harrington shouted from below. Her rifle cracked once. An enemy fighter spun to the ground. Another shot, another kill, but her rhythm was off. The flow wasn't there. She paused between shots, pausing too long. Every break stretched into danger for the men below. A squad trapped behind an overturned vehicle shouted for cover. A medic sprinted into the open and collapsed under a burst before she could adjust. Harrington's throat went raw, screaming into the radio, but it was useless. Static answered back. She squeezed another shot, dropped another target, but it wasn't enough. The valley was bleeding. And then the boy's sergeant, the one saved in the last ambush, was hit, dragged into cover, pale, gasping. His men yelled for help, their voices rising in desperation. Harrington glanced up at her, fury and fear colliding in his chest. "You freeze now, they die." Her cheek pressed to the scope, but her eyes weren't steady. They were glassed over, caught somewhere else entirely, somewhere far from the valley, far from this war. He knew it, he'd seen it before. She wasn't seeing targets anymore. She was seeing ghosts. For the first time since she had come into his orbit, Harrington felt the legend shatter. The whisperer, the untouchable phantom, the shadow that never missed, she was breaking, and men were paying the price. He scrambled up toward her, gravel tearing at his palms. He dropped beside her, grabbing her shoulder. "Look at me." She didn't move. Her eyes stayed fixed to the scope, her finger trembling over the trigger. Sweat traced her temples. Her lips moved soundlessly, like she was whispering to someone who wasn't there. Harrington shook her hard. "They need you here, not there, here." Finally, her eyes shifted, gray meeting his. And for the first time, he saw not silence, not steel, but raw panic. The kind soldiers bury so deep it burns when it finally surfaces. "I can't," she whispered. "Not again." Her words hit harder than the gunfire echoing around them, because it wasn't defiance. It wasn't refusal. It was a confession. Harrington didn't have time to pull her apart. The valley was dying below them. He grabbed her wrist, forced her hand back to the rifle. "Then don't do it for you. Do it for them." Her breathing shook, but her eye returned to the scope. One shot. Then another. Her rhythm clawed its way back. Slowly, painfully, she began to cut through the enemy line. Every pull of the trigger came like a battle against herself, but one by one the valley shifted. Soldiers broke free. Positions opened. The enemy fire thinned. By the time reinforcements arrived, the ground was littered with bodies, both theirs and ours. The survivors dragged themselves out, bloodied, exhausted. Harrington climbed down from the ridge, rage and relief burning in equal measure. But when he turned back to where she had lain, she was gone. Rifle, pack, everything, vanished like smoke. Hours later, he found her outside the wire, perched on a broken wall, rifle across her knees. She didn't look at him when he approached. "You almost cost them the valley," he said. His voice carried more pain than anger. Her reply was flat. "I told you I can't save them all." "No one can." Her eyes finally lifted, sharp and hollow. "Then why do I still see every face?" Harrington had no answer, because he saw them too. Every commander does, but not like she did, not with the same clarity, not with the same punishment etched into her silence. He sat beside her, both of them staring into the night. For a long while neither spoke. And then she said, barely above a whisper, "It should have been me." He turned. "What should have?" Her hand tightened on the rifle, her jaw clenched, but she said nothing else. The silence stretched, heavy and suffocating. Harrington knew then, the night she always hinted at, the wound that bound her, wasn't just about loss. It was about guilt. Guilt so deep it had rewired her into the shadow he now relied on. But shadows don't last forever. And he feared hers was running out of time. Why did the storm wake her screaming? The thunder cracked over the base like artillery, shaking the windows. Rain hammered the tin roofs, and in the barracks, soldiers stirred, muttered, rolled over. But outside, near the wire, she sat drenched, rifle in her lap, eyes staring at something only she could see. Harrington found her there, motionless in the downpour. He'd long stopped asking why she was always alone. But this time, when he touched her shoulder, she flinched, hard, violent, like a cornered animal. Her eyes snapped to him, wild, unrecognizing. For a second he thought she might actually raise the rifle on him. Then the recognition slid back into place, but her breathing stayed ragged, her hands trembling against the steel. "You were there again," Harrington said softly, not a question. She looked away, jaw clenched, rain dripping from her cap. For a long moment silence stretched. Then, in a voice hoarse and cracked, she whispered, "You want to know? Fine, you'll know." She didn't tell it straight, not like a story, more like shards of glass pulled one by one from a wound that never healed. It was a village, not even a target, just a place we passed through. Kids running barefoot, women carrying water, men who wanted nothing except not to be in the way. We were tired, careless. We thought we owned the night. Her voice broke, she swallowed hard. They hit us at sundown. Mortars first, screams, fire. I was on the roof with the rifle. I didn't miss. I swear to God I didn't miss. But there were too many. And then... Her hands clenched around the stock. Harrington stayed silent, letting the storm speak around her. "There was a boy," she said finally. "Couldn't have been more than 19. Looked like the one from last week, the one who ran for his sergeant. Same eyes, same damn fool courage. He tried to drag his friend out of the fire. I had him in my scope. I had him, but my finger froze." Her breath hitched, chest rising and falling in shallow bursts. "He died before I pulled, just like the others. Burned, shot, crushed. I saw every face, everyone." Her voice cracked, raw now. "And then him, their commander, close enough I could see the scar on his cheek. I had him, I swear I had him, but I hesitated, just a second, just 1 second, and he slipped away." Her eyes finally turned back to Harrington, gray and burning. "That was the night the rifle stopped being mine, the night it claimed me, because from then on I swore I wouldn't miss again, not ever, not at the cost of another face." The storm raged, wind whipping rain sideways. Harrington sat in silence, her confession cutting deeper than any after-action report he'd ever written. "You think that makes you weak?" he asked quietly. Her laugh was hollow, bitter. "It makes me cursed. Every trigger pull is another debt. And debts don't vanish, Colonel, they pile up, until one day they bury you." Harrington wanted to argue, wanted to tell her that carrying ghosts didn't make her cursed, it made her human. But he knew she wouldn't believe it. Not now, maybe not ever. The storm eased slowly, thunder rolling into the distance. She sat back against the sandbags, soaked to the bone, eyes still far away. When she spoke again, her voice was low, almost a whisper lost in the rain. "You want to know why I hide? Why I don't want my name in reports? Because names get remembered, and when the ghosts come, they know where to find you." Harrington closed his eyes, the weight of her words pressing into him. For years he had thought himself hardened, immune to confession, to guilt. But tonight he felt the crack, not just in her but in himself, because he carried ghosts too. He just hadn't admitted it aloud. They sat there until dawn, the storm gone, the desert steaming under the newborn sun. She didn't speak again. Neither did he. But Harrington knew this. The night had opened a door she could never close again. The ghosts were no longer just whispers in her mind. They had a voice now, and they would follow her into the next mission, the next trigger pull, the next silence. And when the moment came, when hesitation returned, he wasn't sure she'd choose the living over the dead. Because some wars never end, not on maps, not in treaties, not even in death. Some wars live inside you. And hers was only just beginning. Why was she gone from the roster on the last mission? Her name wasn't on the list. It never was. But Harrington noticed the absence more sharply this time. A major operation clearing a fortified ridge, vital for securing the valley below. Command expected heavy resistance. They wanted every gun, every hand. And yet officially she wasn't there. Harrington almost asked, almost filed her in, but something stopped him. Maybe he knew she'd be there anyway. Maybe he knew she never needed permission to step into the fire. When the helicopters dropped into the valley, rotors chopping dust into storms, Harrington's eyes scanned the ridgelines. Nothing, just rocks, smoke, and distance. The squads moved out, boots pounding, weapons raised. The first gunfire cracked minutes later. Then he saw her. Crawling across a shale slope, M24 strapped to her back, her body hugging the earth like she belonged to it. She slid into position on an outcropping above the enemy stronghold, her silhouette blending into the stone. Calm, focused. The storm inside her seemed quieter. For the first time in weeks, Harrington felt something like hope. The battle erupted. Enemy fire poured from bunkers dug into the ridge, tracer rounds streaking like venom across the sky. Squads were pinned, cut off by overlapping fields of fire. Men shouted into radios, static screaming back. And then her first shot. Clean, precise. The machine gun nest silenced. Soldiers scrambled forward using the gap she carved. Another shot. An RPG gunner dropped before he could fire. Another. Each trigger pull steady, deliberate, the rhythm returning. She was herself again, or maybe, finally, more than herself. Harrington moved with the squads, shouting orders, but his eyes kept darting up to her. He knew this fight wasn't just about the ridge. It was about her, about whether she could silence the ghosts long enough to save the living. Minutes dragged into hours. Smoke thickened. The ridge refused to break. Then came the moment. An enemy squad flanked from the east, unseen until it was too late. They poured fire into the pinned soldiers, shredding cover, cutting down men. Harrington saw it, saw the line collapsing. If they broke here, the whole mission would fail. He looked up. Her scope was already there. But her breathing stuttered. Through the haze, Harrington saw her freeze. Just for a second. The ghosts clawing back, whispering, pulling her finger off the trigger. "Not now," he muttered under his breath. "Not now." And then she fired. One shot, the enemy leader fell. Another, their machine gun dropped. A third, a fourth, the flanking squad crumbled. The line held. The men pushed forward, storming bunkers, clearing the ridge yard by yard. And still she fired, steady now, every shot opening space, every shot buying life. By the time the last bunker fell silent, the sun was low, the valley bathed in firelight. Soldiers staggered out, bloodied but alive. Harrington climbed to the outcropping, his legs heavy with exhaustion, his chest tight with relief. She was still there, rifle across her lap, eyes distant. "You didn't freeze," he said. Her lips curved into the faintest smile. "Not this time." But her voice carried no triumph, only release. Harrington lowered himself beside her, the two of them staring out at the ridge below, littered with smoke and silence. He wanted to thank her, to tell her she had turned the tide, that her legend was real, that every man out there owed his life to her today. But he didn't, because he understood now. She didn't do it for thanks, she didn't do it for legend. She did it to keep one more ghost from joining the others. The night fell. Fires smoldered across the ridge. The men celebrated, laughter sharp against the dark, but she slipped away as she always did, vanishing into the edges of camp. Harrington didn't follow, not this time. Because he finally understood something that had taken him his whole career to learn. Some heroes don't want to be remembered. Some don't need medals or names carved into plaques or songs sung about them in bars back home. Some carry their war in silence, and the silence is louder than any applause. Weeks later, Harrington stood in the armory again. The clatter of boots, the chatter of soldiers, the sound of rifles slamming into racks. Everything was back to normal, but the bench where he'd first seen her was empty. The M24 was gone. No one asked where she went. No one filed her name in missing reports. The base simply moved on. But Harrington knew. She hadn't disappeared. She had simply returned to the shadows she belonged to. The place where ghosts walk, where silence is both burden and refuge. And sometimes, late at night, When the valley winds howled through the base, Harrington swore he could still hear it. A rifle bolt sliding home. A whisper in the dark. Not every hero stands in the spotlight. Some choose the silence. And sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts.